Welcome to the Living to 100 Club podcast. Here's our host, Dr. Joseph Casciani.
Hello there, I'm Joe Casciani, your host for the Living to 100 Club podcast. Our conversations are all about aging well and doing what it takes mentally and physically to live longer and healthier. Our guests share insights and recommendations about successful aging, stories of perseverance, and inspiration about our future. Today's program focuses on the science of dementia and the latest research on preventable causes of dementia. Our guest for this podcast is Dr. Paula Hartman-Stein, a geropsychologist and co-author of a chapter, Preventing What's Preventable in Dementia. This is in a new text, Handbook of Evidence-Based Prevention of Behavioral Disorders in Integrated Care. Paula has been a previous guest on our podcast. She joins us today to discuss what we've learned about the risk factors for dementia and the lifestyle factors that may account for as much as 40% of dementia cases worldwide. Can we change or modify these risk factors? If so, does the risk of developing dementia decrease? How big a role does better nutrition and diet play in reducing our risk? We'll tackle these questions and others. First, a little background on Paula. Dr. Hartman-Stein is a nationally recognized clinical psychologist, gerontology educator, and journalist. After retiring from full-time work as a clinician in private practice and associate professor at Northeast Ohio Medical University and adjunct professor at the University of Akron and Kent State University, Dr. Hartman-Stein currently works part-time as a consultant and educator, offering lively presentations to community and professional groups on healthy aging and improving memory skills. This fall, she has a new role as adjunct professor at Brevard College, Brevard, North Carolina, teaching lifespan development. Broadening her promotion of the power of the pen, she also leads writing workshops on Zoom or in person as an approach to reduce stress, deepen spirituality, and enhance optimal aging. Paula, it's great to have you back on our podcast.
Well, thank you, Joe. Thanks for inviting me. This should be hopefully a fun and interesting conversation between the two of us. So
I think so. I think so too. I think it's going to be a very informative, inspiring conversation. So I always like to open by asking our guests to tell us a little bit about the journey. I went through some of your professional history, but tell us about the journey that brought you to where you are today.
Okay, I'll try to make this succinct. Well, I'm from Western Pennsylvania. I'm from a working class background. In fact, I'm half Croatian and half Ukrainian. So I'm very interested in all the world events, the tragedies that are happening in the Ukraine right now. I'm actually a coal miner's daughter, and I've had opportunities for education, for which I'm grateful. So I went to the U of Pittsburgh, wanted to be a psychologist or a journalist, and I have become both, but my bread and butter has been from psychology, much more than my writing. I went to grad school at WVU, West Virginia. I did an internship actually in journalism for a PBS television station, and I worked in radio a little bit. And then I got a master's degree from there, and I worked my first professional job in psychology or counseling was at a dialysis unit. So I worked in hemodialysis as a counselor in Akron, Ohio. And then I knew I wanted to, go further and couldn't decide what to do. And so I audited 2 courses at the University of Akron and from the Institute for Lifespan Development and Gerontology. There's a well-known professor there. I believe he's retired. I'm not sure. He just kind of like the Energizer Bunny keeps going. Harvey Stearns. And took 2 courses there, and but then decided to go to Kent State and went into clinical psych and worked in health psych. And so I had this opportunity. What really thrust me into the gero world was I had this opportunity at Akron General, which is now part of the Cleveland Clinic hospital system. I had this opportunity to work at a geriatric assessment center. And I was already licensed for about 6 or 7 years, but I realized how little I really knew in depth about that topic. So I was married then and I couldn't really move. So fortunately, at Case Western Reserve, they had a new program called a clinician development program. And I was the first psychologist to go through that. It was really designed for primary care practitioners. So I did that. And Joe, you won't believe how long that took. It was this is a true story. Who could make this up? 1 day a week, 7 years. 7 years. So that's how I really, I shadowed gerontologists, psychiatrists, geriatric psychiatrists, took all of the CE programs that they had for their residents, et cetera. So, and then my capstone experience was to design a course for Cleveland State University on the pragmatics of clinical geropsychology. So that's what I did. So then went back to working at the hospital for a number of years, but decided I wanted to broaden my work. And I left the hospital, started a private practice called the Center for Healthy Aging, where I was for 21 years.
Yes.
And yeah, and there I did a number of things really in the community, in the gero world. I got some grants. I did this thing called the Keys to a Sharp Mind, which was at a continuing care retirement community. We did that for 3 years. And then I love to say this. I brought chaos to Kent. Now, what does that mean? Chaos, K-A-O-S. Kent Area Orthography Society. Oh. What is orthography? You know what orthography is, Joe?
Sure, go ahead. Yeah.
Spelling. So I designed these courses about how to be a better speller because I believed, and I know that it's true, at least anecdotally for me, because I went through it, is to, it helps your visualization skills. So I got this grant and I ran adult spelling bees, older adult spelling bees. So you had to be 55 or up for these spelling bees.
Great.
And these were not, we had a great prize, by the way. The winners got to go to, at that time, the AARP was having these national things in the West, in Wyoming, and our winners went there. So anyway, I did all this stuff. And then I developed a thing called the MEMO, M-E-M-O, Memory and Mood Club. And I did that for 10 years in my private practice. And I led groups twice a month, 10 years. And these were for people in the community who did not need, to be in facilities. They did not need assisted living. But what they needed, they needed some brightening of their neurons. Let's put it that way. But they were shy or depressive and didn't want to go to free classes at the university. But they could tolerate these small groups of about 8 to 12 people. So it was a really wonderful opportunity, and that I do miss. I've edited a couple of books. I still write for a trade paper called The National Psychologist, and my beat is Medicare or aging issues. And as I've we left Ohio, and now we're in beautiful Western North Carolina, and wrote this book chapter during the pandemic, and now I'll be teaching at a small school. So all those things have happened.
Yeah. Well, good for you. Gold stars to you. A lot of innovative programs, very progressive ideas as a psychologist, and all the while staying connected with the gero population, seniors, older adults. That's great. That's great. And I was really impressed to see this chapter that you wrote, because I know this is a very kind of popular topic these days as we look at dementia, and we're putting more of a spotlight on some of those dementias that might be reversible dementias. I was working years ago in a geropsychiatric unit, and we would often see admissions who were very confused and disoriented, and everybody thought it was just a dementia, maybe Alzheimer's, but we could find after some medical attention, proper nutrition, good medical nursing care, and the person would clear mentally, cognitively, and those were the reversible dementias, what I would call secondary dementias, maybe due to nutrition or stress or depression or trauma. But I think this is such an important topic. So I'm thrilled that you wrote this chapter, and it opens up an opportunity for us today. Let's start by just talking about dementia in general. We know it's a collection of symptoms, but how do you define dementia, and how does it progress in in a normal course of the illness?
Okay. Well, a lot of people are confused about the term dementia. I've heard it misused many times. Dementia is really an umbrella, a large term that refers to a wide range, of medical conditions caused by brain changes. And the most common of the dementias is Alzheimer's, and we have sort of at least two subgroups of Alzheimer's: those who develop symptoms prior to 65, and those who get it in later than that. I think one of the important messages that I'd like to convey is that it's not a unitary disorder. That is, many people who are diagnosed with Alzheimer's dementia also have some vascular or blood vessel changes. And also, as you mentioned, some people who have mild cognitive impairment, it doesn't always, quote, convert to dementia. It can be reversible because it may be just a quick story that you reminded me of. I'll never forget this. There was a gentleman, this is long ago in my practice world. He was admitted, those were the days you could stay in the hospital longer. Anyway, so this gentleman was in the hospital diagnosed with dementia. I was the one to interview him, found out that he lived alone. He was a quirky guy. It was V8 juice with vodka. So he thought he was getting all his vitamins and nutrition, but he drank a lot of vodka. So he was in the hospital for about 7-8 days. They dried him out. I retested him. Lo and behold, his cognition improved tremendously. So yes, what we ingest, what we eat, what we drink certainly doesn't have an effect.
Sure.
Yeah, and there's a number of other kinds of dementias that besides the vascular, you can have something called frontotemporal dementia, which is tough to manage as a caregiver. Wow. Because that with those, it changes people's behavior. That's the most dominant symptom, more than the memory. And then you can have dementia secondary. You can have Lewy body dementia, LEWY, named after the man who came up with this, Lewy bodies in the brain. And a type of Lewy body dementia is secondary to Parkinson's disease. So there can be that. So those are the most common ones, but you can have especially the vascular and the Alzheimer's together, certainly.
Sure. Yeah, they can coexist. Yeah, and I think it's important to emphasize what you said at the outset, that there's a collection of symptoms or clinical signs that together create the picture of dementia. It's not any singular disease, dementia itself, but there are different variations like Alzheimer's, Pick's disease, and frontotemporal, and so a lot of variations. And these are the what I call primary degenerative dementias. In other words, these are not reversible. These are not treatable. We can manage a lot of the symptoms, but we cannot cure Alzheimer's, not yet. We cannot cure vascular dementia. No. So these are the primary degenerative conditions. And then what we want to talk about today and explore is this whole notion of the reversible dementias, or those that are treatable, those that are what I call secondary dementias. Just by that very term, that means they are reversible. So you did a lot of research on the delay or prevention of dementia when you wrote this chapter. Tell us what you learned and what you can share with our audience.
Okay, I'd love to do that. And for those who are listening, I'd like to challenge you to listen to what the modifiable risk factors are that are pretty well documented, and then pick one or two that you might want to work on for yourself. So this is real practical stuff. Again, you know, this coal miner's daughter never went away. I mean, we're practical people. My parents, my family, practical. So, okay. First one is of the well, let me go back to this. It's interesting. There were two independent research groups in the world, the Lancet Commission out of the UK and Europe and with some Americans. And then there was another group in the eastern side of the world, and they published their findings all around the same time. It was in the air, right? So there's a great overlap. But the ones that I'm going to talk about, there's 12, and then just a few months ago, the 13th one came out. And so let me just launch into that. Well, one is about lifelong learning. And certainly if you're in your 50s, 60s, or 70s beyond, you can't change what you did as a child, but you can change what you're doing now. So you can take some courses, and I will tell you, Joe, my brain has been getting a workout in the past 2 weeks by taking this position at Brevard College. I have to learn some new software I'm on a big learning curve. It's not easy, but so that's my new challenge. Hopefully I'll get through this thing. Anyway, so keep on learning, never stop learning. We used to say, when I was in graduate school, we used to say the 3 N's, no new neurons. Well, that's considered wrong today, bogus. Throw that idea out. We do have more neuronal growth as we live. So the second modifiable risk factor is to hear as well as you can. And I tried to understand why would that be a factor? Well, it does make sense when you think about it, because if you are missing things, if you're not hearing a lot, you don't have as much stimulation in your life. You're just missing out, okay? So it's believed that the reason that hearing is so important is to build up what's called cognitive reserve, or extra brain cells that we need. Not just to live, but to help us if we have a brain injury or a small stroke or something like that.
Right.
And then I'm going to add this one. This is not in my chapter because this just came out. And it does make perfect sense, again, when one thinks about it. And that is improving eyesight. Now, I think this is an accurate thing to say. Most people are not that hesitant to get glasses, right? Or maybe some people are hesitant to get cataracts removed. But if you can they're considered safe procedures to get, in fact, I had a cataract removed 5 years ago, and, it was really amazing. And it's something else. So improving one's vision and one's hearing, those all help bring in more information to our brains, right?
Right. Sensory stimulation, sure.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So the next one is about weight. And so this has been an acceptable risk factor with both of these groups of researchers. And we look at BMI, body mass index. And if you don't know how to do that, you can look it up really easy to figure out your own body mass index. Just go on the expert, Mr. Google, and put in, BMI and how to calculate it. And within a couple minutes, as long as you know your height and weight, you can see what your BMI is. Now, it's not an ideal factor because it's considered a surrogate measure of body fat. And there are different cultural groups, Asians and African Americans, and also as we age, the BMIs, the ideal BMI can change. But in general, 18.5 to 25 is considered the ideal BMI in general. Okay. See, the studies with BMI were all done on white males. So that's why there's some differences depending upon your age and your ethnic group. Okay, so you want to keep your weight in check as much as possible. That's for overall health, but it's also for, well, in my chapter in another book that I edited about 10 years ago, we said, and this is so true, what's good for the heart is good for the brain. So keeping your weight in a reasonable way helps your heart, helps your brain. So the next one, and I don't like to call it exercise because I think the E word has some, I don't know, it has some negative connotation. So I like to say M&M, move more. So you want to move. And without a doubt, this helps our brain health, our heart health as well. And but the researchers who went into all the in depth on these studies found that there is no totally accepted optimal dose or intensity or duration. These were not identified in these what are called meta-analytic studies. Now there are recommendations, but these are not, as hardcore. And that is about 150 minutes a week plus some strength training twice a week. So those are general guidelines for health, but you have to start somewhere. So many people in my age group and older are not that active, and so you have to start slowly. 5 minutes a day for the first week, and then see if you can reach 30 minutes a day. And also, if you have trouble with your mobility with walking, there are a lot of chair exercises that one can do. There's a program you can look it up on, again, Mr. Google, called Sit and Be Fit, and look at the ideas there. Okay. So physical exercise, as if you watch CNN, you know the name of Dr. Sanjay Gupta. So Dr. Sanjay Gupta has a popular press book that I like called Keep Sharp and Build a Better Brain. And I'm going to quote him. He says, physical exercise may offer the greatest return on investment in yourself. So moving, but, Joe, maybe you've had on your show, have you had on your show people from the Blue Zones Project in the United States?
No. Yes, I did. Nick Butner actually was one of my early guests. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, Dan's brother.
The brother of Dan, right. Well, in the Blue Zones, we don't have time to go into that, but those are the areas of the world where people live the longest and the healthiest. Okay. Well, they talk a lot in all of these areas about movement, natural movement.
Sure.
So not necessarily going to gymnasiums, but taking stairs, parking a little further from this, where you're parking, doing hobbies that are active, like gardening, like dancing. A good friend of mine's mother is in her 90s, and up until she was about 89, she was a square dancer. And so that kind of natural movement is very good. My parents didn't believe in gyms and thought people who did that were kind of wimpy because they should be out there, working. And so my parents both lived until their 80s and never saw a gym in their life. I don't think they knew what it looked like. So, but they took walks in their property, they did gardening, that type of thing. So moving naturally is really important. Okay. The next one is about controlling the vascular factors, that is our blood vessels. And the rule of thumb in both of these big meta-analyses that were done is that if it's possible, through medication if you need it, is to keep the systolic, that's the upper number, it's S over D, systolic over diastolic, keep that systolic of about 130 or less from the age of 40. So one of the things that I learned in the last few years, I didn't even know they had such things, are these portable, really like small things, blood pressure cuffs. You can buy them in, on Amazon, in the drugstore or whatever, and they're really easy to do. And so I'm fortunate not to have hypertension, but my husband does. So he does take his fairly regularly. So it's an easy thing for a person to really monitor. The next one, which is related, of course, to BMI, is improving what you eat, the nutritional part of things. And one thing that I'd like your listeners to know, if they don't already, go on to, it's a simple URL, in the computer, myplate.gov, myplate.gov. And so our government is part of your tax dollars at work, so take advantage. I did it today just to see what I could learn, because I haven't looked at it for a while. And right away you get this little quiz, and it's useful information. And then you can get all kinds of information that do sync with, let me use that verb, sync with everything that I uncovered in looking at these huge studies. So those are things, ideas, and I know you had a guest on your show last year. So my colleague, Bridget McCaw, yes, a nutritionist, and she and I wrote this, co-authored this chapter. And the idea of eating berries for their anti-inflammatory properties. Every good diet that has been studied has leafy greens in it. Everyone, things like nuts, whole grains, and legumes. And I said to Bridget, I don't know that. I can't define legume. Help me with legume. So legumes are things like peanuts and lentils and peas and black beans and soy and chickpeas. Hummus is made from chickpeas, right? So that's a legume. So the other big message that I learned in reading all of this, okay, is to stay, it's not possible completely, but to try to steer away from ultra processed foods. And again, I said to Bridget, what's an ultra processed food? I don't, and she said, well, most foods are processed to some degree, except if you're eating a berry, if you're eating a nut, that's in its raw state, right? But when we cook a food, that makes it processed. An example would be, what's that thing called fruit leather, those things that kids eat.
Yeah, the pressed dried fruit.
Yeah, well, not like a plum, but the thing that looks like leather. They're used as treats. Kids eat them as treats. Well, you don't even know what fruit it was. So the further away it is from its raw state, that means it's really processed. So soda pop is another example of an ultra processed food. So things that are really don't have any resemblance to the ingredients in their raw form is an ultra processed food. So, again, we can't totally get away from that, but you do want to try to limit it. And that's been one of the things that after I did this work about a year or so ago, I've been striving for in my family to have less of that.
Sure.
Okay. Then we get into the other thing that we ingest, and that would be alcohol. And this is a controversial area. Okay. But I found it really interesting in these two big studies. They talk about limiting it, but they're pretty liberal in what their findings were. What they said is keep it under 21 drinks a week. So that's a lot. So that would be 3 per day. Now, they did not differentiate gender, male, female. So in other studies that I've come across, there is a difference with the genders. And so women, 1 drink a day is considered, probably all you should do. Men 2. So, and then, you see other studies. I saw one just the other day, July 14th, in fact, and this is entitled Moderate Drinking Linked to Brain Changes and Cognitive Decline. Well, that's one study. But when it's taken overall, it may not be totally bad. And in fact, in the blue zones, these areas of the world where people live a long time, there is some drinking of wine with meals.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a controversial area. I will say that. But certainly you want to limit it, and you certainly don't want to have 21 drinks in one day, or you will probably die. Okay, so it needs to be, if you're going to drink it all, it needs to be spread out, etc. The next one is avoiding head trauma. Yeah. So if you are a bicyclist, definitely wear a helmet. And of course, our public safety laws have us wearing seatbelts. So you want to avoid head trauma if at all possible. And of course, there's been a lot in the news in the last number of years about football and the CTE, the brain damage that the players get. So that's when I was first doing, just tell you a little anecdote, my son was in high school. He's now 33. So when he was in high school, 16, 17 years old, that's when I first learned about brain damage, concussions as a risk factor for dementia. So I said to him, you know what, Eric, I don't care what you say or what you do, you are not playing football. So unfortunately, he has a body type that's much more of a runner type. And so he didn't even gravitate to that. So I was grateful we didn't have to argue about that.
And soccer's taken a bad rap for that as well.
Yes.
I remember when I was learning about dementia, we had this term for our boxers because they had heavy blows to the head in the boxing, and the condition was called dementia pugilistica, just from that constant, probably similar to what CTE is now, chronic traumatic encephalopathy. Probably very simple, that deterioration of the gray matter from the repeated blows. So yeah, good. That's a good factor. Sure.
Yeah, that pugilistica also, they talk about a contra coup injury. So just think about it. If you're getting slammed in the head, your brain is going to go back to the back part just a little bit and then to the front. So it boom, boom. So that's a contra coup injury.
Right. Coup and contra coup. I remember.
Yeah. So very bad. So, all right. Well, what's another one? Well, the next one is also difficult as we age to do this, and that is to get adequate sleep. Okay, but the findings from the two big meta and I keep saying this word wrong, analytic studies give me hope because general guidelines are that 7 hours, you want to strive for 7 hours. Well, in these studies, what they looked at a longitudinal, that means a way over time, a 28-year follow-through study, which, as you know, Joe, is very hard to do and expensive. But over in this 28-year longitudinal study, they found that people did not differ if they averaged 5.5 hours, 6 hours, 7, up to 8 hours a night. So my takeaway from reading this and trying to comprehend it is that this is, there's some individual differences here. And you hear about, famous people who said they sleep 5 hours a night and they did fine. And maybe that is true. Maybe, now taking naps is not a bad thing. You just don't want to take a really long nap or you'll have difficulty falling asleep at night, of course. So there's a whole lot of things about sleep, what is called sleep hygiene. And, as we get older, and boy, do I get this now. I used to sleep just solidly for hours and hours. And now that doesn't happen. So I have to get up at night but getting back to sleep is the skill. You have to teach yourself some skills here. Sometimes it's easy to get back to sleep, but if you're worried about something, not so easy. So I'm part of sleep hygiene. When I did my memo groups, memory and mood groups, I would teach some skills, like some easy to do meditation skills to get people in a zone where they can fall back to sleep. And there's other, strategies like that, but getting at least adequate sleep routinely is a good thing for our brain. Now, one of the theories about it and I would like to mention it before we get off the air today, is the controversy about the causes of dementia. But one of the ideas is that when we sleep, there are these cells in our brain called microglia. And the microglia, the metaphor is that they are janitors of the brain, and that they sweep up or get rid of some of the remnants of cells that die, or that have some accumulation of a protein called amyloid. Anyway, I don't think it's fully known why sleep is important, but we know that it is, because people who have horrible sleep have more cognitive problems.
Sure.
The other,
If I could just step in here, we know that the different stages of sleep are also, they also impact our well-being, and deep sleep is shown to be so important because it does offer what you're talking about, that kind of cleaning mechanism where the toxins are especially cleaned in the lymphatic system in our brain. And if we don't get the deep sleep, those toxins don't get cleared as well as they should. So I think that's also, we're learning more, we're drilling a little bit deeper into the different stages and how they contribute to, to our health and well-being.
yes, well, also we do know that memories of if you're trying to learn something, that sleeping consolidates those memories. So if you're reading something you want to remember and you read it before you go to bed, you'll probably remember it better after a good rest. So that's another thing. The other areas, and I want to mention medication, and that is that you want to go to your physician and ask about, am I on any medications that are drying me out? Anticholinergic side effects, they call that. So if you have some incontinence of urine, for example, the drugs that are often given for that condition have some negative side effects on our brain. So that's not good. So you have to maybe try some other methods, or live with wearing pads. I mean, I'm just nice. But also medications that are, we know that sleeping pills are not good. They are not positive for our brain health. And also anxiolytics, anti-anxiety drugs also are problematic. So, which delves right into the next two really important, and we definitely need to mention them, and that is limiting or reducing or coping with our stress and treating depression. That is a well-known, well-established risk factor for cognitive decline, okay? And we could have a whole show on that for sure. And related to that is the last risk factor, so important, called striving for meaning in your life. So the Japanese call it ikigai, and iki is life, gai is value to life. So we need meaning. It doesn't have to be, and our meaning can be modified over our lifespan. It's not always the same. So when you're in the middle of your career, okay, that's giving you meaning. But if you're beyond that stage, you have to find other things that are giving true meaning and purpose. And the blue zones also talk about purpose being critical. So those are the main areas of risk factors. So I ask your audience, think about the areas that you're mostly at risk for. What do you not do that well? And maybe really work on that. I think that's important. Movement is something that I'm trying to do more of.
Yeah, that's such a good list. It occurs to me that we're also talking about those ingredients for living longer and living healthier. And they're at one end of the continuum, this successful aging group. And at the other end of the continuum are the factors that when they're missing or when they're absent, they produce some kind of cognitive loss or cognitive change, or can create conditions that may mimic dementia, that may be, looking like it, it's contributing to confusion or disorientation or memory problem. So it's not only how the plus side is so good for us, but it's also when it's really missing, and not just that it interferes with our longevity, but it actually impairs it.
Right.
So it interferes. So this is an interesting list. It's an interesting conversation as we talk about diet and physical activity, and we know these are essential, and blue zones, I always use blue zones as kind of the roadmap here. And here's what we've learned about the world's oldest old. And these are the ingredients that help us to live longer, in the absence of stress and the importance of meaning and purpose. So all of these ingredients in their absence, or when they're on the negative side, they're really damaging. So it kind of puts another spotlight on this whole collection of successful ingredients.
Right. And part of that one ingredient about coping with stress is to also not be isolated. So there are studies suggesting strongly that if you were very isolated, that it's just like smoking 15 cigarettes a day. So if you don't have, and it can be a church group, synagogue group, a garden club, a pickleball group in your community, whatever. But having camaraderie, having connections. If you're lucky enough to have a good family, fantastic. But we can also create our own small, quote, family units through our friends. I think it's really
that's good. That's a good point. That whole concept of staying socially connected, social engagement, and the isolation does work against that well-being. I understand that. That's an important addition or kind of qualifier to all of this. This is a great list. I mean, it's so important. And like you say, if we have a list in front of us, these are the things that are, we can rank from 1 to 10. If I'm at 10 on some of these, that's great. But if I'm at 2 or 3, maybe I should put some attention into those areas that are 2 or 3.
Exactly. And if we have just another 2 minutes, I'd like to tell you, because this is such cutting edge stuff that came out early this week, that it is now out in the public domain that there have been, quote, irregularities in the Alzheimer's research over the past 20 plus years. Millions, if not billions of dollars have been put into drug studies to reduce a protein in the brain, beta amyloid. And a whistleblower he's a research scientist himself, reported to the National Institutes of Health after studying this in depth, that prominent investigators altered images and reused them over the years to support the hypothesis or the idea that it was amyloid buildup that caused Alzheimer's. And this is showing that they actually engaged in terribly unethical processes to promote the drugs.
Well,
so you're going to hear much more about this, I predict, over the next few months, but it just came out this week to the public.
Yeah, that's startling. That's startling to hear that. I'm looking forward to learning more about it. Yeah, drug studies have not produced that many promising drugs. I mean, we certainly can't interfere or delay Alzheimer's. We can manage some of the symptoms, but we certainly can't reverse it.
Well, we can delay it through behavioral changes.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah.
And I predict there'll be more and more interest in this because of what they found with these unethical claims.
Yeah. So the Lancet Commission, for my listeners on this program, I have an article coming out just today in my July newsletter, and I talk about this very subject of preventable dementias, and there's a link to the Lancet Commission in the UK and all of this list and why these different factors made their way onto the list. So Paula, this is a great conversation, very thought-provoking, I think very educational for the audience. So I really want to thank you for sharing this. And that you were so close to it. You've written a chapter in a prominent textbook on this very subject. So good job. Good job.
What we've done also, Joe, if I can add this, is after I wrote the chapter, then I put together a series of 4 on-demand webinars on the topic in depth. So those are available through my website.
Great. Okay. Well, why don't you share with our audience your website? How can people get a hold of you, and where can they get more information?
Right. Okay. And in fact, on the website, which is www.altogether for FOR healthy HEALTHY aging AGING.com. So centerforhealthyaging.com. And you can go on there, and there is if you look at the programs, there is a free 1.5-hour webinar you can look at that my colleague, my nutritionist colleague, Bridget, and I put together. And then we go into depth with additional webinars, but there's a charge to that. But I also have lots of other articles on the site that might be of interest.
Great resource, I'm sure of interest to many of my listeners. So we are out of time for today, though, Paula. Before we wrap up, I just want to remind our listeners to visit the website, living200.club, to sign up for our email list and download a free copy of my 9 tips to make living longer enjoyable. While you're there on the website, peruse our library of blogs and podcasts. And again, you'll be able to see the article on preventable dementia that's posted now. And finally, if you're interested, reach out to me to schedule a presentation for your group or community organization or retirement community, in person or online. I think there's value in helping older adults feel inspired about their future. Paula, thanks again for being a guest. Hope to get you back sometime in the future.
Thank you very much, Joe. Thank you.
You're welcome. And thanks to everyone for listening to our program today. Hope to see you next time.
Hi, this is Suzanne Newman, host of the Answers for Elders podcast and radio show. We are the North Star that guides you through the complicated journey of senior care with trusted experts in money, law, living solutions, and more. So join us on this station, your favorite podcast channel, or just go to answersforelders.com. Meet the wayshowers who will help your journey go a lot easier.